Welcome back to Techniques in 10, a series where we take a look at the fundamentals of various painting techniques in 10 minutes or less. Today we're going to talk about stippling. Stippling is essentially painting using dots or moving your brush in an up and down movement to apply the paint. Having more dots closer together will make a colour more prominent, and having fewer dots spread out will make it less prominent. Stippling is a great way to introduce texture and variation to surfaces, and it can be used to create smooth transitions on your models. So with that being said, let's get a timer and let's get into it. It is a good idea to practice creating a value scale before moving to more complex subjects. This will allow you to work on your brush control and get used to the style of painting. I begin by mapping out the area, working with fewer dots and spacing them far apart, increasing the frequency in areas where I want the colour to be more prominent. As you work, it is best to keep your brush vertical to the surface so you don't produce any unwanted tails in your dots. As you become more confident, you can switch to a more comfortable position. I use a size 1 synthetic brush as it allows me to work for longer and can hold more paint. Avoid using your nicer brushes for this technique as it will damage the tip. Using different brushes can give you a very different result. Here I have a medium dry brush with reasonably soft bristles. I'm moving the brush in a stippling motion, and this produces a softer finish and can be great for mapping out volumes and shapes on your models. Now I'm using a stippling brush, which is just a short, firm bristle brush and produces a more refined pattern than the dry brush. Now I'm creating a value scale using some colour. Pay attention to how I mix my gradients and the consistency of the paint. When you stipple, it is important to have intermediate colours as you move between the values. These additional steps create more visual confusion in the piece and produce a smoother transition. You can combine stippling with other techniques. Here I've used layers to block out the different values, and I begin to stipple over these areas to break up the bands between the colours. I work beyond the step to ensure the colour is present in both the lighter and the darker areas. I repeat this process for the lowest value colours and for the higher value colours. I start by using a small soft dry brush to map out the volumes and pick out the areas where I want my highlights to be positioned. These tend to be on the folds of the cloth and where they're exposed to the most light. I repeat this process with a higher value to emphasize my highlights. Once this is done, I begin to refine the shapes by stippling with individual dots, smoothing the transitions and creating more visual confusion on the surface. You can see how I'm bouncing the brush over the surface and using my pinky finger as a brace. I work back and forth over an area, increasing the density where I want the most colour. I repeat this process with a slightly higher value colour, being sure to focus my highlights into the folds and where the light would catch. Taking a slightly brighter mix, I begin to really focus in the centre of the highlight and pick out the edges of the cloth. I repeat this process in the shadows, placing more dots where I want the shadows to be emphasized and fewer dots, spacing them further apart as I work away from the dark areas. Finally, taking the darkest colour to really push the value in the shadows. Focusing this colour in the depths of the recess and applying fewer dots as I work out. For the cream colours, I begin by mapping out the volumes. You may hear this referred to as volumetric highlighting or shading, but I'm essentially painting layers of lights and shadows. I use my lighter values to pick out the upward facing parts of the material, or the bits that would naturally catch the light, and I use my lower value colours to reinforce the shadows and to create contrast in the piece. Don't worry if this looks messy at first, we'll be refining it and cleaning it up by stippling. I begin to stipple over the layers and break up the bands between the colours, similar to how we did at the start of the video, placing a higher density of dots over the bright sections and fewer dots as I work towards the dark sections. It is important to focus on the band where the two colours meet and create as much visual confusion in this area to remove any indication of it. I repeat this process with the first of my shade colours, being sure to place some dots into the darker value and the lighter value to create as much visual confusion as possible and eliminate the band between the colours. And finally, to push the contrast between each of the sections, I reinforce the shadows by taking my darkest value and stippling that into the recesses, adding fewer dots as I move further away from the darkest point. You can use stippling as a way to highlight or shade your metallic colours. The metal flake in the paint actually makes this a wee bit easier. You can usually get away with being a bit more aggressive with your changes in value. As you can see here, I've created a 50-50 mix between my silver and my gold, and I'm stippling my first highlight. By stippling your highlights, it creates some interesting texture within the metallics. You can create some interesting texture within the metallics to make them look hammered, worn, or brushed. Repeat this process with the pure silver, emphasizing your stipples over the brightest point of your highlight and dispersing them as you move further away. Stippling is great for skin tones. You can produce a softer finish to the skin and a more natural appearance. I start from a base and work up to my mid-tone, covering most of the skin and leaving the base colour in the shadows and the recesses. Taking my time and focusing the dots where the light would catch or where the brightest points of the face would be. I repeat this process with my brighter colour, covering a smaller area and dispersing the dots as I move away from these highlight points. Here we have the finished effects. I really like the stipples in the fabrics and the metallics, as it adds some additional contrast in the model by introducing texture to the materials. I wanted to quickly cover some of the gotchas. When you're stippling, it is important to take into account the scale of the subject and the size of your dots. Here my stipples are too large and create an unrealistic finish. Using paint that is too thick can create unwanted texture in your stippling pattern. Another one to flag is jumping between values too quickly, and this is why I create gradients on my palette. Hopefully you now understand the basics of stippling and you're ready to apply it to your own models. If you have any comments, questions or ideas for future videos, please drop them below in the comments. And I stream a couple of days a week on Twitch if you want to come and hang out. We also have a Discord if you want to come and share some of your work or get involved with the community. And until next time. Hopefully you found this useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe.